G'day internet. Right, looks like enough light for a video, jolly good. So I thought after my last video, which was like a good 45 minutes of me basically bitching, we should provide some balance by talking about a bit more about solutions to the things I was bitching about, as opposed to me having a whinge. My whinge is legitimate and quite good, but long-winded. But yeah, I think it's important to provide some balance, and I was just reminded myself of the need for positivity and a bit of intelligence and useful forward-thinkingness by reading the comment section on a few things on Facebook and going, good God. It's like that meme, I think I just posted it today actually, again for the millionth time, you know. It's like, me thinks the world's not such a bad place and people are inherently good. Me reads the comment section on anything on the internet. Nope, must all be burned and cleansed with fire. Yeah, it's God, the world's full of an awful lot of stupid. Even when you take the sort of the self-supporting idea that anyone who disagrees with me is automatically stupid, which in itself is a stupid idea. Even when you take that kind of thing out, there's just some really, really dumb stuff out there on the internet. You know, like I think most of us at least can agree that flat earthers are insane. You know, things of that order. That perhaps before commenting on an article you should actually read it as opposed to just the clickbaity title. You know, things like that. Anyway, I digress, because I like to rant and that's what I do. I've decided to not even bother really with trying to keep my videos short anymore. People who like what I do, and the rest of you, well, if you're too lazy to see a detailed analysis of whatever subject with a few jokes and a couple of tangents in it, then, I don't know, go watch some facile idiot on YouTube who does 2-minute videos that don't really have any substance. Yeah, not better at all. So yeah, we tangent thing, I suppose we're running on these blogs now. I've quit smoking. I had my first full day today of absolutely no cigarettes, and I'm not shaking like a leaf or freaking out. I grind my teeth a lot. I do feel a bit grumpy, otherwise it's not too bad. I'm trying to avoid using my wee Nico vaporizer thing there, because I don't want to just replace one nicotine addiction with the other. I'd like to actually just completely get it out of my system, but at least we do have the backup of vaping instead of cigarettes, even though it does make you look like a hipster wanker. Since the guy with a beard and tattoos. It's not a groomed beard though, and my tattoos are not hipstery wanker ones, so it's okay. Yeah. God, I'm so hypocritical. I'm not a fucking vegan though, so it's all good. Anyway, so what I've been doing is eating candy instead of smoking cigarettes, and just doing a bit of replacement therapy. Long term, it's not a good plan psychologically. I do just have to get over the process of being a nicotine addict. But replacing it with food, particularly fruit and water, as well as candy and chocolate biscuits behind me there and stuff, can help my brain to adapt through to an idea of nicotine cravings just being a simple case of being hungry, and then dealing with that with food. I have a very fast metabolism as it is, so I don't have to worry about weight gain. I'm one of those fortunate people. But yeah, that's going well, and I've occupied at least 2 minutes randomly waffling about how cigarette smoking, or not doing it for a day, has gone for me. 2 days before that, the first day being the one where I did this last video that I put up, I sort of had a couple of smokes and wound down the last of my cigarette packet that I was on, while giving lots of them away and doing things like having half a cigarette and then having the rest later, and just sort of roasting myself a little bit off nicotine, or at least smoking it before we went to the full quit buzz. Anyway, so updates on the house unit. As you can see, I didn't have it in the last time. That little crack there is just the top of my door frame, so that's the way out through there. I can grab this sheet of foam and pop it out. Now I've got to one-handedly pop it back in while videoing. This should be fun. Squeezing it. Oh, I've jammed it in the wrong bit. So, the great and interesting thing about building this structure the way I have, without recourse to a level building site, and then without recourse to using a level in the structure itself at all, because the building site wasn't level, and no squares or anything. Everything was done by eye, with just some basic sort of plus or minus 2 or 3 millimeter sort of measurements of things and kind of squish stuff into place and swear at it till it fits type shit. And that meant that once we were complete with this unit, when we came to fit the door panel there, we discovered that the door frame space is about 12 millimeters skinnier at the bottom than it is at the top, and is about 8 millimeters longer down one side than it is down the other. So yeah, very sculptural approach we're taking to the structure. It looks square from the outside, kinda. But yeah, I'm happy with it. It works. I'm sitting in here in a t-shirt. It's cold and pissing rain outside. I have no form of heating on at all. I'm just running some lights and shit, and I'm sitting in here in a t-shirt. That's pretty damn effective. This is the first time this winter I've been able to sit around at this time of night in a t-shirt. I have got a thermal on as well, but yeah, I mean, I'm usually wearing like my hoodie, and I've got like my full-on hand warmer thing running. It was running before. I still had it stuck in my thing, but that was when I had the door open. With this door shut, it's pretty good. It's annoying at the moment because of the way I've got it jammed in place. It's no hinge or anything, so when I pop it open, it sort of sucks all the air out and brings all this cold in and shit. And you can definitely feel my vents that I've talked about in other videos working. The gaps down the sides of me, down the door and down the rear. If you put your hand, or currently my elbow sitting near one at the moment, you can definitely feel a temperature change and a bit of cold there, which is a little annoying, but totally fine, because that sort of just gives me a bit of a sense of, okay, warm up here. As that area cools, it's going to drop towards the cold stuff. We've definitely got enough ventilation going on, so that's really cool. We've had this thing with the door. I don't fully seal it up. I leave a crack at the top there. But door shut at least 2 nights now, maybe 3. And very cold, damp weather. So optimum conditions for producing condensation, pretty much. And we've had none. Like, walls dry as a bone, no fucking problems. So pretty stoked. I think it's unlikely at this point that I'll need to install artificial heating of any sort. We're right in the middle of probably some of the coldest weather this thing's going to have to suffer this year, and totally fine. So that's good. Only other update is, having considered the expense of epoxy and fiberglass for the covering, I'm going to be covering the outside of the unit in fiberglass matting that I've got, and the complete unnecessariness of that, and the hassle with having to get a specific kind of epoxy because it's very cold and I need it to be able to go off, and just all of the things that could go fucking horribly and very expensively wrong with using epoxy resin to adhere my fiberglass to the outside of the structure. I am now considering doing a halfway measure and using kind of the original idea we had, which was going to be just basically use like Aqua Adhere or some other sort of polyvinyl acetate or PVA type glue to adhere cotton sheets or sack material to the outside of the structure and then paint that. I think I might do that with a fiberglass matting. Like, there's no reason that won't work. It'll stick still, same as cotton or anything else would. It just won't be as strong as epoxy resin and fiberglass and usual GRP process would be. I don't need it to be. I need the structure to be light. It's already quite fucking rigid. The fiberglass matting will, no matter what material I use to adhere it to the structure, impart a bit more strength than cotton would have. So we're going to give that a go. I mean, it's all 3 materials. It'll be a lot bloody cheaper. I won't have to import special epoxy in from Auckland or get very expensive epoxy here in Christchurch. And I'm not comfortable working with gross goopy chemical fiberglass stuff, particularly in this weather. Like, it's just too much of a risk, and I just don't want to do it. Nah. Plus, when I'm building things like this, I know a lot of people don't copy my stuff, but I do like to put out that idea that it's kind of like, hey, look, you know, the first micro house I did practically every one of the 18 episodes I did while I was doing the house. I was fucking drunk during the build and during the video blogging and stuff. And I don't edit anything. I basically do everything wrong and still manage to create these quite functional, quite nice structures to live in. And there's actually a point behind that. I'm trying to point out how easy and simple it is, at least technologically and engineering wise, to create self-powered structures that you can live in, that are very small, that are convenient, and all that kind of stuff, with minimal fucking skill, minimal effort, and minimal expense and shit of that order. So for me, like say for this structure, for instance, one of the things we're experimenting with that we haven't used before is using a fabric exterior to kind of just unify all of the surfaces of your exterior, kind of bring everything together, impart a little bit of additional strength and waterproofing before you paint. That's all it's doing. I don't need it to be strong or anything else like that. So the idea for my sort of stuff with the low cost would be, if at all possible, You want that fabric that you're going to use to do over your foam structure, because we've already got our foam structure and our light frame here and stuff up there. You want that fabric to be as cheap as possible, which is why I was going to go with cotton sheet. Well, you can do one better than cheap. I've been given a roll of fabric. It happens to be fiberglass, but fabric for free. So let's use that. We'll give it a go. If it fails miserably, well, I'm down some free fiberglass and like $20 worth of glue. Who gives a shit? You know? It's the advantage of building this kind of way. So now that we're on to talking about building, instead of me quitting cigarettes and complaining about the internet or whatever, last video I did that was 45 minutes or so long, I had this big long rant about, I didn't sort of title it as part of this series, Sampy built a nano capsule house thingy or whatever it is we're fucking calling this one. Who gives a shit? I don't know. People who watch my stuff just watch it. Doesn't matter what I make the title. But anyway, I was bitching and moaning, basically, in short. The bullet point was that people's attitudes in society, as just civilians, your neighbours, people who observe what you're doing and things like that, and bureaucracy are the two problems that are the key stumbling blocks to pursuing alternate ways to live. Everything from interesting micro nano house systems like this, Japanese capsule hotel type stuff, all the way up to tiny houses on wheels that are luxurious and amazing and cost $150,000 and are still far cheaper than a standard normal house system. Bureaucracy in particular is one of the things that gets in the way of using stuff like composting toilets and the full zero waste systems that I've designed that I'm absolutely 100% confident will work. Most of them I've actually fully tested out before. Other elements that I'm looking at using have been tested by other people in multiple different ways. They're very easy to do, and I'm very much looking forward to doing some videos where I build these things and show you how to do them. But finding places where you can legally get away with doing that is definitely a problem bureaucracy-wise. The second I say waste burner or waste furnace, people go, oh no, that's an outdoor fire, you're not allowed to do that. It's like, well, yes, but if I could just explain how this system actually recycles its own exhaust and has no gas or exhaust output to atmosphere at all, like it's totally self-contained, you can't even see any flames once it's operating, but you don't get a chance to do that because it's not on the magical checklist that the bureaucrat is holding. If you build a really, really cool tiny house that's totally off-grid, does all these amazing things and yada yada, or even maybe it does use mains connect, but you've done it correctly, it's to building code and all the rest of it, and you park it somewhere, and some neighbour comes along and goes, I don't like that, and they complain to council. Council is honor bound and legally bound to come in and investigate, and if anything you've done doesn't check their wee box, you haven't, for instance, gotten the correct consent for a building, because a tiny house on wheels, even though it's on wheels in New Zealand, largely these days is being determined. We have very grey area laws all over the place. It is kind of being fought out in courts and things, but pretty much most of the time they're being determined as being a building, and therefore building consent bullshit applies, which is absolutely inappropriate when it comes to tiny houses. A lot of the building consent things and building code systems are impractical at best and actually unsafe at worst. For tiny houses, and just very, very stupid, and don't really allow you to leverage the coolness that a tiny house on wheels can be. But if you count it as being a vehicle, and therefore say a caravan, a home-built caravan or something of that order, then most councils in New Zealand have a maximum of 50 to 60 days that such a unit can be occupied on a given site before it has to be moved. And yeah, there's just a lot of bullshit. Meanwhile, the government is bitching and moaning, and everyone's bitching and moaning about the housing crisis and all of the rising homelessness in New Zealand and how no one's got places to live. And the problem isn't that there isn't technologies and solutions available to that issue, and also to climate change and various other things. The problem is people have very old hat attitudes and sort of heels stuck in the mud, kind of, I want things to be done this way because it's the way I did it. And I had to go through that stupid consent process, so now everyone does. And if I see my neighbour doing this cool, free and easy new thing, I'm going to do my absolute damnedest to make it a problem for them, because I'm jealous that I went through this bullshit for my big old house that I've got and they don't have to. Or I don't really even know what goes through people's heads that makes them complain about what their neighbour's doing. If a person's not directly irritating you with noise or something, leave them alone. It seems odd. Anyway, so I've spent sort of, by the looks of it, 4 minutes there rehashing my 45-minute rant. Believe me, I went on quite some length, as I want to do. So, it's important though, if we're going to piss and moan, to talk about solutions. The ones I'm going to talk about primarily apply to me, and I don't want to sort of come across with that terribly annoying attitude that people often had, oh, just do this. I don't want to come across with that sort of attitude this shit is difficult. Nothing you do in life is without bullshit. What you get to do in life is pick the kind of bullshit you're going to tolerate. Sweet nicotine. It's the second time I've done that today. So yeah, some of these ideas may or may not work for you, but I'm hoping the sort of the principles and the ethics that I'm about to sort of put out in terms of how I look at this sort of situation and how I intend to deal with it can maybe be extrapolated out for other people. I mean, most of the people kind of approaching this kind of subject are going to be doing it with the tiny house on wheels thing. So you're looking at something that's, you know, anywhere between sort of 5 and 7 meters long, and perhaps 2 to 3 or more meters wide, perhaps 4 meters high. You know, several tons worth of stuff if you've got a large one. Even if you've got a small one, from what I've seen, most tiny houses have at least got, you know, enough space for a little mini bathroom and toilet, a little bit of a downstairs area and a mezzanine or something like that. So you're usually looking at something that's kind of like a 4 meter by 4 meter cube minimum. I build a lot smaller than that because I do micro and nano size structures, but my speciality is in building absolute minimum scale structures that are the smallest you could possibly do while fitting a person in. Anything smaller and you're basically wearing a spacesuit. I design stuff that's a lot more like the inside of a fucking space capsule than it is like a house, because I enjoy that, and that's fine for me. So there are going to be things I'm able to do, and we're about to get into that you can't with a tiny house on wheels. Okay, so the first approach I've got to get around these problems is the way I've built. My units are so small, and particularly in their height, they're sitting room only. And that means all of my units, even with a bit of standoff off the ground and stuff, and room for me to sit up in here, they average about 4 or 5 feet, 4.5 feet at maximum tall. So, you know, about 120 to 130 centimeters high. Like outside this thing, the roof's about here on me. It's really small. And less than a meter wide, because that's enough width for me to have 50 millimeter thick insulated walls, and also sitting here cross-legged without my knees hitting either wall either side of me, and fit this couch that the whole unit's built around. So yeah, less than a meter wide. The couch itself's about 750 millimeters or 75 centimeters, I guess, roughly. Not even 800 anyway. So my full external dimensions are about 940 millimeters from memory or something like that. So yeah, and my length obviously is full, as I've said in other videos, 2 meters. If I sleep on a complete diagonal here, I'm able to stretch out with about an inch below my toes before I contact the rear wall. If I sleep straight along the structure, I sleep in a slight curve, or my feet do contact the wall, but it's strong enough for me to boot it a little bit in my sleep without trouble. And that's cool. Mostly that's because of the large cushion pillow thing built into the couch behind me here. When I flip that over, just the way it makes me sleep, if I remove that, I'd actually have enough room to just lie down full length quite easily in here. But again, it's a very minimum size structure. Now, the advantage behind all of that, people often ask, why on earth do you build that fucking small? That must be so annoying and cramped and difficult. No, it's not. I'm very used to living in stuff like this. But the reason behind it is the first micro house I built was 2.3 meters high at one end and 2.4 at the other. So it was as tall as you could build using standard size sheets that are 4 foot by 8 foot or 1200 by 2400 if you like millimeters. And I built it and someone complained. And what I found out from the very, very lovely and positive and helpful Christchurch City Council compliance guy, I think his name was Alistair or Andrew, I can't remember his last name, it was a long time ago. He was very complimentary of my work. The thing was fully built when he got to see it. Really impressed. He said he got to see about 2 of these things a week that people had complained about. That's how often these things are being done and people are complaining, because you have no idea. That was 2 years ago or so in Christchurch. I expect the problem is worse now. And he said mine was the best one he'd ever seen, and he was really surprised that I wasn't a professional builder and stuff. But yeah, that's what happens when you paint everything matte black after you've bogged it all, and it makes it look like you did a good job when you didn't. Black is good. Anyway, I talked to him about what was and was not okay. So it turned out, because I was freestanding and I had no mains water or plumbing, no mains water or electricity connection, and I had no exit plumbing or anything like that. And if I was going to put a shower or toilet in, I intended to keep them fully self-contained and whatnot. Pretty much I was all good, as long as I wasn't pumping out any sort of wastewater or anything. And if I was, I would need to have a septic tank that passed some sort of issues or whatever. So theoretically, the system I intend to use when I have some space to build additional units onto this unit for creating a shower, toilet and whatnot, probably, I hope to never see a council compliance officer again, but probably would actually be okay. We'll get into the I hope to never see them again thing later. Because I can do that now. If they don't like something you've done and there's no way for you to remediate it or fix it immediately or whatever else, then you're either looking at fines, legal action, or having to disassemble what you've built and do something else with it or whatever else. But anyway, first sort of bit to get around this kind of stuff. In most councils, and I think in most parts of the Western world, let alone New Zealand and in Christchurch, they have to allow for small structures to be built on people's properties, whether rental or owned properties, just to allow for things like little kids' play houses and tree huts and having a garden shed to put my garden tools in, or anything like that. And I'm building at sizes and scales that are just like that and are completely freestanding, removable. They basically, my units qualify as furniture. In fact, they're so small you could damn near. This one I figured out the other day, actually, if I'd have built it just an inch thinner across this way, I'd be able to send it through a normal doorway without any sort of modifications and move it inside somewhere or whatever. I need a double wide doorway or a double door or a large window or something to be able to feed this thing into a house, but I have no intention to do so anytime soon. So, but yeah, it was an interesting thing to note. 900 is about the widest you can go. If you do want to be able to get through normal doorways easily, and I'm about 940, so bugger. Anyway, so being the size of furniture or a garden shed is a really, really good idea. If you can manage to operate in these sorts of spaces, that's fine. The interesting thing that I had with this one when the council guy turned up, he really liked the way I'd done my no foundations. I just had piles of old building tiles from bathroom floors. And the idea being that if there was an earthquake, because this is very common here in Christchurch, the structure would be able to slide around on those tiles and then just be repositioned afterwards. And it was also created a bit of a kind of a sort of earthquake-proof foundation without technically having a foundation, because you don't want to have a foundation. As soon as you've got a foundation, you're doing groundworks. Now we're a building. Even if it was a garden shed, you might start having problems there. Okay, so that's the first thing we do. Build as small as fucking possible. Now, what I learned from that guy was that even though the building code says that structures need to be, in most here in Christchurch, most L1 or residential type building zones, structures need to be a minimum of 800 millimeters to a meter away from the boundary fence or whatever. And in my case, I was a minimum of 800 millimeters on one side and I think 1200 millimeters on the other away from the boundary fence. And he said, no, you're too close. I said, oh, that's strange. I thought it was because part blah blah blah. I'd actually done my reading. Pays to do your fucking research. I hadn't done enough though. In my reading, part blah 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 says thing, and he said, oh yeah, absolutely, you're correct. But that's for consented structures. You're an unconsented freestanding structure that is outside of the law, which means another different set of laws kind of apply to you. And I was like, oh, okay, so what's the deal? And he said, well, basically in those cases, you have to be your structure's maximum height away from all of the boundary fences. I was like, okay, well, my maximum height's about 2400, mate. And he pulls out a tape measure, and his wasn't working, so I handed him mine. He said, you checked it out, had a look. He's like, yeah, right, yeah. So about 2300 there, 2400 here. Okay, so my maximum height's 2400, 2300 at this end. So this end needs to be 2300 away from the nearest boundary. That end over there, where your 2400 needs to be 2400 away from the nearest boundary. I was like, cool, we'll call it 2.5 meters and just ballpark it to make fucking sure then, mate. No worries. So I'm going to have to get some boys around here or whatever. She's like, yeah, this thing looks like, you'd be able to just shift it across. It's like, nah, mate, it's not as light as it looks, hey. I think it weighs a fair bit. But yeah, I'll get some boys around, we'll get it done. How long have I got for remedial action, mate? And he's like, oh, look, if you want to be all official like that, I've got to sign a fucking form and do a whole bunch of shit, bro. And like, yeah, it's kind of a pain in the neck, and then I've got to come back, and you've got to do it within 28 days. That's technically the deal, and things. Do we really want to go there? I was like, dude, if you don't have to, I don't fucking want to, man. Like, I can get this done in the next, like, week and a half. I just got to call some boys up. Me and my bro here, that my other brother I was living with was chatting away with me and standing there watching. So I was like, me and my bro here will figure out, maybe we can do it with levers. Otherwise, I'm going to call my boys and we're just going to like get 4 or 5 dudes lift this thing and move it. And he's like, yeah, cool. So I was like, yeah, like 2 weeks. He's like, oh yeah, easy, fine. Just give me a call when you're done, and I'll come check it or whatever. I was like, sweet as G, not a problem. The funny thing is, I looked at him. I said, so real classic bit about this is I'm going to need to go that way by about 1200, right? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, about this way by about like 1200 as well. He's like, yeah. I was like, yeah, true. So that puts me about 1.5 meters closer to the guy who complained. He's like, oh, I can't tell you. I was like, yeah, but I know who complained, dude. It's this guy over here in this flat. So yeah, this is pretty funny. The guy's like grinning at me. I'm grinning at him, going, yeah, God, you love it when the council guy turns up And enforced compliance actually means you're moving your unit not away anywhere, just closer to the person who bitched about it. Oh, I was so stuffed. It was grand. So anyway, from that one we learned that at least here in Christchurch, if we stay, that thing I said about your height, if you're a freestanding unit, only applies if you exceed the standard height of a boundary fence, which is about 6 feet. So if you're under 180 to 190 centimeters roughly off ground level, you can be right up against a fucking fence. You don't have to have any gap at all. But if you're above that height, above the fence height, then you have to be at least your structure's height away from any given fence or property line. Something to know if you're in Christchurch at least. So I started building structures that were way shorter than any fence, pretty much. And yeah, like little garden picket fences that are only 3 feet high might be a bit shorter than this thing, but otherwise your standard 6-foot fence is miles above this in height. And that means I can legally stick it anywhere. On any property that's residentially zoned and even industrial zoned, I can stick this thing. And occupy it. And this is where the law comes in. And occupy it as long as, I think there are some councils and stuff that have stuff about people sleeping in things, but basically they put it down to like, has it got power running into it? Nope, mine runs on solar. Actually, currently I do, but mine runs on solar usually and can be completely freestanding. Does it have water mains connect? Well, currently no, I don't. The module that I will be building onto it is pretty much like a portaloo though, in terms of the way it's plumbed a little bit, although it stores things differently. You could in fact use a portaloo, and that kind of thing is reasonably legal for short-term use at least. So you can start to see how we do go-arounds and we deal with these bureaucratic problems. In the end, you find out what the letter of the law is. It's really great before you ever build anything at all to go and find people in council, ring them on the phone or whatever and say, I'm thinking about doing blah, blah, blah. Can you point me at some resources? Can you tell me the do's and don'ts? Ignore all the ones who say, oh, well, just get a building inspector, you have to pay for this. Ignore all those people. The whole point of doing this kind of stuff is to do it on the cheap. So you don't want to start paying for bureaucrats, but find people who are having a good day and feel like giving advice and being helpful. Once you've found someone like that, plumb them with as many questions as they'll answer, and you'll find out lots of really useful, interesting things. What you're mainly looking to do is find ways around the law, not comply with it. So that's the main point I want to make today when you're dealing with bureaucrats. If you're one of the, I saw a really cool point made on the Tiny House Forum, and some people may disagree with this, but this Tiny House Forum I'm on Facebook, where somebody said, if you're one of these people who wants to be, the good kid in class, who, dots all dots all their I's and crosses all their T's and minds all their P's and Q's and is the teacher's pet, and thus in tiny house terms gets all the building consents required and the house is built to fucking code and everything's on the books and blah 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 blah, tiny houses probably aren't for you. And it sounded like a bit of a shit thing to say, but then I sort of thought about it and watched some of the comments that went afterwards, and I actually had to jump in and agree with them completely and then specify that agreement by saying, look, in the end, if you do dot all your I's and cross all your T's and do all your P's and Q's and be the good kid in class and get all the consents and do all of these things, by the end of doing that, you will have spent so much fucking money on this unit that you're building, whatever side it is, especially if it's a sort of a unique and interesting one like mine, for instance, that it defeats the entire point of fucking doing the thing. You may as well just build a small fucking house according to the normal ways of doing things. Perhaps looking into container crates or something if you want to try something a bit different or a bit lighter or whatever. And trust me, from people who tried to build container crate houses in Christchurch, good luck. Enjoy the bureaucracy. Because basically bureaucrats are not interested in anything they don't have a checklist for. And they don't have checklists for new shit. Christ, building with stuff that is legitimate, like steel frame, is fucking a bit of a nightmare these days. I'm told by builders and stuff. Let alone trying to build with fucking container crates or engineering approvals for this and bullshit for that. And it's just, oh God, it's endless. So this is the thing. Don't try to be the good kid in class. Try to avoid the teacher's attention. Be the kid who sits up the back and gets left the fuck alone and reads comics and no one seems to notice they're not doing their maths work, to continue that analogy. Be that kid. That's how we get away with tiny homes and stuff. Learn to do things in a really discreet fashion as much as humanly possible. If you are going to build an $80,000 rolling mansion that looks like a mini version of a Flash guy's house, then shit, you got a lot more money than I do to start with. We're working on a whole different fucking pay scale, but you're going to attract a lot of attention. Now, you best hope that that's positive attention, because if it's positive attention, that's great. And that's one of the fun things about doing tiny houses, when people are like, oh, well, that's great, I want to try that too. Until you get the nosy old lady neighbor or the old guy who thinks it's a problem or has an argument with you or somehow wants to, for some reason, make an issue or, you know, that ex-girlfriend who decides to fuck with your day, or ex-boyfriend, or whatever it is, and someone calls it in and council turns up. And in the current New Zealand climate, whether it's Christchurch or anywhere else, and this is happening in a lot of places in the world, the government can't decide if these things are vehicles or buildings or what the fucking hell they are. So they basically just recourse to the fastest thing that's going to allow them to say no. And that's what they do. And then you're going to have all these legal fees trying to challenge stuff when you already spent 80k on a house, which you now have nowhere to put, because anywhere you try to put it, they say, oh no, you can't put that there. Or you need like another 80k's worth of consents and fucking special. The idea is, don't fucking get seen in the first place. Don't get caught doing what you're doing. Because you know what? It's a human right to have your own house and form your own space and live in it. And as long as it's safe. I mean, if you've built some ramshackle bullshit that's going to fall down on your 5-year-old children or something, well, fuck you. I hope they find you and say no. But if you've built something that's for yourself particularly, and it's reasonably rigid, it's fit for purpose, it does its job, and all that kind of shit, I see absolutely no reason why you shouldn't be left the bloody hell alone to do whatever you want. You know, there are lots and lots and lots of people who live for years in a caravan on a property, massively violating the 60-day limit, and never have a problem. Because A, they've got good neighbours who do know where the thing is but don't mind, and they maintain a good relationship with their neighbours, or they place the caravan in such a way that no one knows it's there, as an example. Or they do something like what I'm doing. They live in a garden shed thing that from the outside looks like a fucking garden shed. So no one notices it and has a fucking problem, and they can occupy it. They don't put it on the front of the property where everyone can see it and then loudly and obviously occupy the thing and have lots of very noisy parties that annoy the neighbours. No. They don't, you know, suddenly move into a section that hasn't been occupied for ages and ages and ages by the section where the street's obviously full of a bunch of, you know, rich, old, retired people in sort of quarter-acre dream homes, and put this brand new tiny home thing in the middle of the property that isn't in fitting with the local sort of people's idea of how the street should look or whatever. You know your environment, know the people you're going to be around and things like that, and try to work with that. And like, I can't say it enough, try to be discreet, try to be invisible, try to stay out of the way, try not to be seen. You can go for decades, I know people who've done this, go for decades doing stuff that's totally not to code and totally illegal, living in tree huts and shit. You can take it from a former homeless person who's lived outside in places where it's illegal to camp. Like, you can actually be, you know, not technically put in jail, but definitely fined and stuff for doing it, and gotten away with it for ages. Not because I was allowed to, not because I got permission, just because I was discreet. Because I was a little careful. When I made mistakes that got me seen and got negative reactions from the public, I very rapidly shifted, changed my behaviour, and learned from those experiences so as not to get caught and fined. There are a number of things I did in my recent escapades in Queenstown that could have gotten me a $500 fine, I'm told now, I found out later, at any point. Multiple times. But I found out that information, I learned from it, I changed my behaviour, I changed my patterns and stuff like that, and I was never caught doing what I was doing. I lived in Queenstown for a total of 4 months on various different sites, doing various different things and playing around with different experiments and shit like that. Never had a problem with officialdom, never saw officialdom even, and only once had an interaction with a member of the public, which was quite negative, who actually saw what I was doing, and that was because I was an idiot and set a fire where I fucking shouldn't have, and, you know, did some dumb shit. But I learned. And then I immediately moved when I had that interaction as well, because that guy probably was going to call it, and by the time people came looking for me, I'd been long gone. I got to watch them on binoculars looking for me, going, it was quite fun. You know, and this is the thing. If you're going to invest in an $80,000 tiny home that rolls on 4 wheels and has like a $20,000 trailer and the thing weighs like 5 tons, okay, you don't have the mobility that I've got, but, you know, that's kind of your problem, because you've built yourself something giant because that's what you want to live in. If that's what you want to live in, then the bullshit that you've got to deal with and the hassle that you're going to have is finding legal ways to do what you do. It's pretty hard to be discreet with something that large. Although, again, in the right neighbourhood or the right area, you probably can get away with it. I expect, for instance, if you've got some rural land available to you through family, or you own it, or you can rent some, and it's on a back block somewhere or away from the road, and there's only one tiny home on it, or maybe 2, you'll get away with it. The people who get fucked up are the ones who set up 10 tiny homes and make a village. Because then the neighbours, this just happened in New Zealand. I think it might have been actually quite near me in a place near Christchurch, actually. Yeah, there's 10 or so tiny homes plus some caravans set up on this cool farmer had set up this thing. He's basically running kind of, I guess it's sort of like a holiday park without the licensing, which might have been one of the problems with it. He was charging them some reasonable rent. Everyone very happy there. Lovely picturesque thing around some chestnut trees and whatnot, apparently. It was great. Lovely wee community happening. Neighbour moves in next door and wants to put up some fucking holiday homes or some shit and has decided they don't like the look of that. Called it in. Council came in and said, yeah, Jesus, you're allowed a maximum of 2 of these things, even on a section this size, dude. You can't do this. End of story. Sucks, but that's how it is. But the guy had like 10 or so tiny homes on a house. I mean, this is not discreet shit. And it's in clear violation of some pretty obvious bylaws. So, sorry, team. I mean, I'm glad for you guys that it ran as long as it did. I think what you were doing was really cool, but I mean, you all had to know that at some point that was going to get fucked with. It's just one of the realities. It's kind of the reason we put wheels on these things, team. So, yeah. But what I advise to people is go as small and light and cheap as you possibly can. So small and light, because you're less likely to be discovered. It's easier to be discreet, easier to hide, less likely to interfere with various bylaws. Like I say, my one is so small and light and low. I mean, it's not for everyone being this small and light, but it's so small and light and low that there aren't actually any relevant bylaws I can be stung with. Unless I'm mains connected permanently, or when I start working with the plumbing end of things, the other module I want to put on the end of this unit, there's actually a separate freestanding module of its own. Technically, I think there might be some issues. But again, if I can prove that that module is a fully self-contained unit, that whilst it allows water to go in, doesn't leak any water out, then I'll probably be all right. It's one of the reasons I'm actually looking at making the unit a little larger than I first was going to, and setting it up so that all of the wastewater that comes out through the filter system actually goes into a little mini garden plot that absorbs that water and doesn't release any water out to ground. So even though the water's filtered and quite safe to release to ground, it still isn't released. If the unit's completely self-contained, they can't complain. They cannot complain if I'm running a scientific plumbing experiment that doesn't leak anything to ground. It's the same with the fire thing. You can't give me bullshit about Clean Air Act and not having outdoor fires if I'm technically not having an outdoor fire. If I'm running what appears to be a box that's very fucking hot, that is a waste destruction unit that doesn't vent any gas to air, then technically you can't call it an outdoor open fire. You see what I mean? We just find go-arounds to the problems. And the interesting thing is the go-arounds to problems, especially when it comes to waste destruction and stuff, are actually a good thing. Like the problems councils have with micro houses and stuff having their own little toilet systems and whatnot is they're not, maybe up to code or whatever, and there's a good chance that they might leak or explode or stink or do something nasty which is going to annoy the neighbours, or worse still, leak toxic water or black water or human waste to ground, and they're worried that it won't be processed and taken care of correctly, which would be bad for the environment and also stinky bad for the neighbours, right? Right, but if that motivates me to build a system that's so self-contained and built within itself and whatnot, that scenario is completely impossible, then it gets me around their problem, but it's also created some really cool technology that actually is better than the wastewater connect system that most people use, where they flush their toilet with perfectly drinkable water that goes all down the sewer and gets sent to these waste ponds over the other side of the hills here, and all of this stuff gets done. Eventually a lot of it gets discharged to the sea. Here in clean green New Zealand, they recently put in this big set of fucking outflow pipes out to sea. Everyone was dead against it. Everyone voted against it. Council put them in anyway. Massive big set of outflow pipes that go 2 kilometres out to sea off one of our swimming beaches, actually. And every now and then, if there's an overflow issue due to flooding or whatever, the thing, they actually do dump raw sewage out in the ocean there. Small amounts thereof and only in emergency situations, but it's still a suboptimal result. See, that kind of thing will never happen with my systems. Most people put their rubbish and their recycling out in bins out here, and that recycling goes to get stored at factories where we're shipping it over to China and shit, just like everyone else in the West was. They've stopped us doing it, and so now we've just got it piling up as a giant fire risk at factory sites all over the country, because hardly anyone is using any of the actual available technologies to recycle plastic and aluminium and things like that like we used to, or other countries are. I think I've mentioned in videos before, there are multiple forms of technology that allow you to recycle plastic into building materials, new plastics that you can use again. You could pyrolyze it back into fuel that's cleaner and better burning for your engine than the original product. Like all kinds of shit like that you can do. But no one does this with plastic. We just store it, big fat stacks at factories doing nothing, because we can't sell it to China anymore. Our aluminium, it's the same. I think some places recycle a little bit of glass, but a lot of our stuff that's going into recycle bins, people are, diligently separating their organics and their plastic and their metals and their glass here in New Zealand, all over the country in different councils and stuff, and a lot of these things are just getting recombined and thrown back into landfill. It's fucking pointless. It's a total shit show. And then obviously your actual rubbish goes in a bin and goes to landfill, and a truck comes to pick all of this up and take it to a factory that uses petrochemical powered type systems to crush it all up, to sort things. You can see where this is just absolutely terrible. Now, if you can process all of your waste on site, as I intend to, glass, metal, plastic, all of it, anything that you aren't already reusing and recycling mechanically and manually, like I'll use that jar to hold things or whatever, and you can just blitz it all on site and melt it down to slag and carbonize it all and produce byproduct that has no gas to atmosphere, and that your byproduct is basically pure carbon and some lumps of melted glass, which you can then basically bury quite safely, or use as part of your filtration system and your water and black water filters and stuff. There's a lot of cool things I'm going to be able to do. Like I said, really looking forward to the videos once I've built this stuff. Then again, this is like 10 times cooler than what the official proper way of doing things is. At which point, and here's my other suggestion, I've used this one myself before, never forget the power of mass media. So if a council does come and fuck with you in your tiny house, make it difficult for them. Don't just bend over backwards and let this happen. Get on the media, tell them a sob story, mention things like how your house is way cleaner and greener, and how you did this to be cheap to solve the housing crisis that New Zealand is experiencing, and this is a really cool system, and this and this is up to code, and this bit is better, and anything else that's an advantage like that. That's remember things like clean and green, fixing the housing crisis, shit like that. Mention this shit a lot and get media involved. It makes a hell of a story and they fucking love it. It makes the government look fucking stupid, local or national governments look stupid, because they're all on about virtue signaling like crazy about things like climate change and the housing crisis and homelessness. Because here's a newsflash for you, politicians aren't really about fixing problems. What they want to do is keep their very high paid jobs. And they keep their very high paid jobs by getting votes. They get those votes by looking cool. They don't actually have to fix anything or do anything good. Sorry, that's just a reality of our so-called democratic societies. Politicians are for shit. They're there to keep their jobs. So, and once you know that, my God, you can leverage it. You can actually get some fucking democracy done by pointing these things out and making them look bad. Because in the end, they'll just stop fucking looking for you to compliance. That guy I mentioned before, who was really cool. I'm not saying he was a bad dude. The bureaucrat that came to my place, he was actually really complimentary. He was really cool to deal with. He was very, very reasonable. He didn't have a problem. I didn't have a problem or anything like that. I called him over 8 times and I never got an answer back. Telling him, hey, you come check this thing out. I've moved it. I've done this. I've done that. I sent him 4 emails. I called him multiple times. I never heard back from the guy. Because in the end, you know what? These people, they can't be fucked. They don't want to waste time coming around and fucking with your house and how you live and shit. They only do it when there's a complaint, and they only do it to the minimum amount that they're available. As soon as you start costing them money or fucking hassle to do that shit, so they go, oh, well, it can't be here on this property, the caravan thing, for instance, you can literally move a caravan off-site into your neighbor's driveway for a day and then move it back, and you've got another 60 days. In most places, that's a go-around. Some places you've got to move it for 48 hours or whatever, but you only have to move it for a bit. Some places you don't even have to do that. You just move it to the other end of the property. Can't be on the same site, on the same property for more than 60 days, but the second you move it more than 4 meters, it's on a different site on the same property, so now you get another 60 days. See what I mean? Bit of thinking, bit of go-arounds, and make it hard for people to fuck with you once they've started to do so. Before that, make it incredibly difficult for them to even fucking know that you're there in the first place. I mean, this is how I've gotten away with when I was homeless, building huts in the bush and getting away with it for ages until I didn't. And then being able to carry on getting away with it after the council and the police knew exactly where I was. I leveraged the media thing. I wasn't a dick to them. Always try to be cool with the people who come in. Don't get angry at the council enforcement officer who turns up. It's not their fault. They're just doing their job. Get angry at the system on the internet, through the media, in letters and in emails, but never person to person. Always be approachable, kind, nice, happy and chill with people. But hey man, I totally get what you're doing. Okay, so what's the go around here? How can I figure this out? Ask things like, okay, so what is the remedial action I need to take in order to comply, sir? Things like that. You need to know some lingo like that. It helps. People really appreciate it because they're used to dealing with people who are getting really upset at them and fucking screaming and yelling and telling what an asshole they are, and they're just trying to do their job. It's just like cops. When you tell someone who's got a bit of authority that you're happy to comply, you would like to try to do so, and could they please help you to do that, they will generally be helpful and cool. And if they've got any discretionary power at all, they'll be very inclined to use it in your favor. If, however, you tell them they're a cunt who's fucking with your life, and they can fuck off and you fucking hate them and get the fuck out of here, where's your warrant, and get an attitude with them, then that person with that tiny little bit of power will use every single piece of it they've got to fuck your day as much as they can, because you just motivated them to by pissing them off. So don't piss people off. It's not that fucking hard. Right, so that's about the same length as the last one. Cool. Hope you all enjoyed it. Those of you who do watch, I pointed out on my last upload that hardly anyone watches this shit, so I've given up on trying to make them short. And a bunch of people said they did actually watch my stuff, which was quite nice. I often wonder when I see the view numbers on YouTube if it's just like people who've like looked it up, seen that it's 40 minutes long, gone, oh fuck that, but I still get like it's got a view. I don't know. I honestly don't really care. I mean, this stuff's kind of like a video blog for me. It's like having a diary, and it's primarily for my main patron who is overseas and likes to see what I get up to with the money they give me, and just a good way to interact with them and whatnot. So to wind this video up, speaking with them, hey buddy, I do have some positive news as well. I talked a little bit about how living behind a bar is a little bit suboptimal noise-wise and things like that. So I've been doing some investigations recently into, once I do have this unit complete and ready to move, other places that I can shift it to, and I'm happy to announce that I have found several potential sites, and I'm still working on some recon on some others. Some of them are totally legal, just people's yards and backyards and things, and some of them are a bit more go hide in the bush sort of buzz. There are pros and cons to both approaches there, but at least for the people whose yards I might be using, like backyards or whatever, it looks like they'll be sort of free or incredibly cheap options. And obviously the way that I'm building and doing things these days is all currently 100% legal, and I will either be keeping it that way as I move through the next few phases of construction, building the waste destruction units and toilet system and shower system. If I'm unable to make those 100% legal, I will at least make them 100% mobile, easy to pack up and shift if asked to do so, and 100% really fucking discreet and easy to hide. The toilet unit, for instance, I'm very much considering, because it won't really need to be insulated or anything, just getting an ordinary small-sized tin shed. They cost about $70 from a hardware store. That will be enough room for me to stand up and crouch down to shit in and stuff, and store the hardware elements required for heating water, storing water, the shower head itself, shower tray in the bottom, and then various other bits and pieces that are required for crapping and cleaning myself and things of that order. But from the outside, it just looked like a garden shed. I mean, hide in fucking plain sight. How simple could it be? So yeah, got a lot of really cool ideas coming up that I'm feeling really positive about, which is cool. Winter won't last too much longer, so I'm starting to sort of look towards the future and feel like a bit of a better, less I want to die all the time sort of person. So my mental health being a bit nicer to me than it has been over the last couple of months, which is good. I think that's mainly because I've just sort of taken control of shit and gone, okay, I'm going to make some healthy decisions and stop smoking and start thinking more about my future and doing proactive walk forward, think about the future and fix stuff with it, instead of focusing on how difficult it is at times to live where I currently am. I'm focusing on where I'm going to be going next and how that's going to be cooler and how to make that happen. And then instead of focusing on how irritating, for instance, it is that bureaucracy and nosy neighbours and various other people make it much more difficult than it needs to be to live in tiny houses or nano houses or alternative accommodation of various sorts. I'm just trying to focus on the ways that I can get around those problems, and share those solutions with you. So as per usual, going forward, anything we find or think of that's going to work better, or anything we try that doesn't work or does work, I will blog it and tell you all about it and stuff. And that way, hopefully, those of you who are interested in doing things like living in a van, or living in a bus, or living in a caravan, or living in a tiny home, or living in a tree hut or on a boat, or any of those things that isn't buying a gigantic house that you have to pay for and heat and do all those other inefficient, silly things that all the old hat, not even 2019 people are doing. You want to do anything alternative and forward thinking, good for the environment, good for your budget, well, keep watching me, because I keep trying to do all that stuff, and damn, I don't think anyone gets smaller than the shit I'm doing. Like, at all. Unless you're wearing a spacesuit. I am looking into that sort of idea too. I think it'd be fun to do one day, just like make myself like an insulated suit that's got heating and cooling elements all through it that run off some sort of solar power rig on my back, just because I can. It'd be quite fun. So yeah, watch the space team. It's always crazy. They fuck up, and sometimes they succeed, and it's always reasonably entertaining. So yeah, cool. Have a good one, team.